And by D3, I don't mean the JS library. I mean Mighty Ducks 3, people, okay? The one with the added sound effects and whatnot. So what I wanted to show is kind of a combination of some of the past things we talked about last few calls here. One, we got our CDN working off of CloudFront. So my course delivers its assets from CloudFront unless I sit on the page too long and it times out, or unless I'm doing a live demo and they've turned off the server again or something, which would be hilarious. Thinking about it, just really thinking about it. Let's go to this other website. Anybody else hop on University VPN and then hop off and then all university links break? Seems to happen to me a couple times a day.
Remember when
University VPN is problematic.
Yeah,
I just don't use
that.
VPN.
Remember when I was particularly frustrated this morning, Brian?
Yeah.
It was the University VPN that started all of the rage.
Well, anyway, the thing I was trying to show with it is, so we've got our web components. They power that other website, but they also power now our online course portfolio, which when I'm not having weird VPN issues, you can see is actually pretty ridiculously fast. Now, the big deal with our new integration, again, if this would load, is the stuff that I showed in the unbundled builds work. So this unbundled web components repo basically boils any integration down, and Nikki can confirm this now because I think she used this week. That you basically
I did.
Yeah, and it was successful.
Yeah, so the side project where I put the video player in a mecha, it made updating the video player a lot nicer, with the exception of
so
the
much easier.
that I swear at.
So that finally loaded my view source. I swear that that address is not actually that slow. But the big deal with what unbundled builds gets you is standard workflow. So like for Nikki to ingest the video player, she git clones that repo, goes into it, runs yarn add at LRN web components / video - player, or the Ali video player, whichever one, and then adds it to one file and does yarn install and then yarn run build and gets an output that has effectively 5 lines of integration code, no matter what the platform is. So I'm going to assume, Nikki, is that right, that this is basically what your integration looked like?
Yep, it was. And it was so much better than dealing with all of the other scripts that I had initially when I had the player in there. Because it was using Zend, and I had to, figure out the order and how I was actually going to work around it. But this made it so much nicer. I was able to drop a ton of lines.
So the magic of that file and what the routine is doing is it's effectively figuring out at runtime what version of the assets to serve you. Whether it's late, like Evergreen browser, which is ES8, even though it claims ES6 here, or some older stuff. And then for older stuff, it actually ships you the polyfills. So it's a lot lighter weight than just giving them to everybody, which is what most build routines do. They give you every asset. We just give you the entryway. So why that's important is what we've done historically is like stuff like this. So we've got a tag, we'll actually load up way too many tags. I don't know why that page is so large. Load up way too many tag definitions into the DOM. And if you look here with the circle spinner thing, it's actually paper spinner, which is tapping an AJAX call and a token tag, all the way up. So what I'm trying to get towards, and it's not from our integrations necessarily, but I think this puts us at odds with what most people are doing in industry. Most people are going to say, we're building an application, yay, we're done. And they run a script and they get this big thing that they just add to the page and go, hey, it's a web app. All of the use cases that we've described have another person that's actually creating the content. And it's so like we're creating the environment for that person to create the content, but we don't know what the content's going to be. So what this is, or what I tried to work on in the last week, because there were some interesting ideas that came out of conversations last week, is I worked on something called Dynamic Import Registry. So it's a vanilla JavaScript element that is a singleton that you ask for. And then it doesn't do a ton. Like there's not a lot of code here. It's like 100 lines. But the important thing it's doing is it's able to dispatch events and listen for those events on the window in this case. So what this thing is doing is it's listening for things that say they have an element that someone might want to use. So the way that we can leverage that then, if I get this little share bar from Zoom out of the way, there we go, is can be demonstrated first in this thing called Mutation Observer import. So the way that you would actually leverage this is someone says, hey, give me the registry. You might tell it where your assets are located, and then you register what the things to potentially import are. Now, why this is important is because, again, I don't know if you're viewing a web page that has Wikipedia query on it, but I've set up the conditions by which someone who's the content contributor could use hacks potentially, or be building a new website, or like in Nikki's case, she's augmenting an existing application. She doesn't want to have to load every part of hacks or every part of Elms just to get to the video tag. She also doesn't want to have to manage all the build step, and as she said before, like getting all that JavaScript in place correctly. So what we're trying to aim for is almost zero config, just tags understand that they should, it's called hydrate, but basically have their definition applied. So what this looks like, hopefully if this repo starts, let's see. SSL protocol error, that's adorable. Let's see if I can go to the other one. No, I can't, okay. No, I can't show that one because of SSL protocol error, that was nice. But the idea is, with this Mutation Observer import tag, anything that you put inside of it, it has a mutation observer that's gonna process anything that's added into it. So what a mutation observer is it's a primitive part of the spec in JavaScript that basically just is notified anytime anything changes in the DOM. So in this case, this little snippet is saying, every time a new child is added to this tag, I need you to run through it, and if it's a web component, then I need you to process it. And that process it goes and checks the registry and says, hey, import the definition on the fly. So what we get with that is a page that loads that has very few things actually required to get the page to start. And then if elements exist, the fact that the elements are in the page is what makes the definition import. I started working on this in a prototype form 2 years ago after probably the 5th time I was swearing at Dr. Charles Severance, that I only mentioned because there's a pair of people on here, because you just couldn't get the notion that, you know, I just want these tags to work. I just want them to show up. I'm like, that's not the way that this spec works. It's like, well, then no one will adopt it. And I was like, that's actually not inaccurate. So what I'm trying to do is boil the world down to, you put the tags on the page, copy and paste this thing at the top, and they magically work. So I think I have the conditions whereby next week I'll be able to do that on any website. So I got this thing working right before we started, called WC Autoload. It's now published to NPM. So what it does is it pulls in the registry, which again just lets things say, hey, this is the tag and where the definition is. And then, unlike our other singletons, and this is a weird pattern, Nikki, I wanted to at least point out, so maybe I get your feedback on. This singleton also injects a window event that is for when the DOM is loaded. And when the DOM's loaded, it then forcibly applies the singleton. So,
oh, that's different.
So the fact that this file is referenced is the only thing you need to get the JavaScript injected into the page, and it's hitting things at the right timing.
Wow.
So this calls for the loader, which is called WC Autoload. So imagine, and I'll show it in a second, there's tags sitting in the page. And then it will register anything that it finds in a global variable that has the list of what to do. And then this is a fun query selector you can do. Document.querySelectorAll not, and then colon defined. So if you do this, this is a very small bridge between CSS and JavaScript where you can query the page for all the tags that don't have a definition. So this would return Wikipedia-query if there's no definition in Web Components spec for Wikipedia query. So at runtime, it checks are all the things not defined, and then it processes them automatically and loads their definition in. Then taking some of that Mutation Observer code from before, it's basically just listening on the body for any new tags to show up. So what I can do with all that jazz is boil the world down to, and a production integration would look like, get rid of that line. Imagine that this says like build.js or something, right? Would basically just point to WC auto load and then pass this little snippet here, something that we can in our tooling generate automatically, just this huge object that's keyed by what a tag's name is and where it lives. And by having that stuff live in the page, then any tag you use will automatically import its definition on the fly. So if I go to this page, we inspect and view network and do JS and I reload, right, we get Wikipedia query. However, I didn't load Wikipedia query. If you look at the way that the tree starts to dedupe here, you can see it's hitting these files at the top of the page, which are just some polyfills for local work. It imports these two files, and then it immediately goes to work importing the other things involved. Now, I don't have to demonstrate this, I don't have a meme maker tag in here, right? There's no definition for meme maker. But I'm gonna go into the HTML directly. I'm going to edit grid plate as HTML. And I'm gonna add, I have in my copy and paste history a meme, there we go. So I've got this meme maker usage, and then because it's in a grid plate, I'm gonna have to write slot equals 1. Whoops, I hit the wrong button. Oh, slot equals column -1. Maybe. I appear to have made it angry. Let's try to, pretty sure that's all it was. Let's paste it in again and try it again. Yay, live demo. Slot equals call -1. Oops. Huh, it's not putting, it's not showing up there. That's weird. Well, let's try and put it at the top of the document. Hey, there we go. All right, so what then happens, and I don't know why gridplate wasn't showing it, it is actually in there, or was in there, so maybe I put it in between tags accidentally or something. Try that again, because it's making me mad. Slot 3, whoops. Hey, there we go, put it in slot 3. So what happened there is, if you look at the network, you see way out here, and it's probably like, yeah, it's way out here, right? It's 4 seconds after the page loaded, which is when I went and did that. It imported the definition for meme maker because the mutation observer watching the whole page realized there's a new definition for meme maker and just went and imported the resource. So what we can do with this is have a insanely small time to first paint page load in any content management system. And as long as we've done the unbundled builds and we put it on a CDN, people could basically copy like one line of code and start using any of our library of tags, and they'll just import themselves automatically.
Holy moly.
That is really cool.
So, for example, if you had the H-A-X tag, that could have the exact same integration routine as the video player, as paper button, as anything else. We don't actually need to know or care what you're putting in the DOM. The DOM will figure out and import automatically, which is...
Where's the correlation between the tag and the JavaScript?
So that is in, there's a window.wc auto load registry. And so like if I take out these two things as evidence, save, and then go here, all my definitions go away. Now, in most production environments, you won't need that. That's literally something I need for local development. But the tags are all defined in this little registry here. So like, for example, if I wanted H-A-X, H-A-X/H-A-X. Okay. And now we go to the DOM as it's here, and we inspect again. And then we're going to get real crazy. We're going to actually edit as HTML. And I haven't tried this, so we'll see what happens.
See if it catches fire.
Yeah, I think this will work. So then if we wrap it in hacks tags.
Jesus.
Oh my God.
Hacks pulls itself in and then makes all of the stuff that was there a second ago editable. Now the styling is, clearly a little off because there's no, there's something you have to import as well that makes the styles happy. Because you can see my little drag handle, but I could, that's some minor cleanup most likely on that part. But it's going to go and dedupe and everything's going to get its dependencies and shove them in the page. So the mutation observer is also set for being deep, or it's not deep, it's called a subtree.
Subtree, yeah.
So theoretically, I should be able to just put any old tag down here. Well, I can't do it. Well, I could do meme maker. Can
you explain what that means, that it's set to be a subtree?
Yeah. Hold on, let me see if it works. Oh, good, it still did it. Okay, so the way a mutation observer works, let me reload the page. So the way a mutation observer works is it's monitoring a tag. So what I said in the mutation observer was any change in the body, it basically notifies an event. So what the mutation observer looks like, and they're really simple, and you can use, like, I'm pretty sure can I use is flawless point. Can I use? But let's just verify. Yeah. So mutation observer, and that goes all the way back to IE11. Like, you've been able to use these for a while.
Oh, Opera Mini.
I hate that they still have some of these on here, like QQ browser. Oh, thank God it works in QQ. So what the mutation observer is it's going to run this function every time it notices a mutation. Now, a mutation to the DOM is defined here. So you say, so you basically tee it up and then you apply it here. So I say, hey, observe, and this is the target to observe. So in this case, I'm saying observe the whole document. And then child list means any of the nodes directly below me, right? So one level deep. Subtree, though, says anything below me, even if it's in the children. And so the reason that this callback got hit when I put meme maker into the page deep into the, right? So that first part, if I take, like, actually, let me take that off to prove it. So if I take off subtree, because that's not the default, and then we go into our page, I probably don't even need to refresh. But now if I go into this div and I edit as HTML and we paste meme maker, it's there. However, the definition of meme maker is not, because this sample has some progressive enhancement to it. Now, if I were to take that meme maker tag and move it up into the body, it now taps the mutation observer and you get the definition unpacked. So see how it has a shadow root now? I love that this demo actually just worked. Did not plan any of this. So yeah, I think this is gonna be one of the most important tags that we ever write.
Kind of amazing.
Yeah, it's what makes unbundled builds, like, it's what it needs. Yeah.
Which if we, so that file, or sorry, not that file, that the next step is that JSON array, right, that has the key, because Andrew asked what where that relation is. In our tooling, if we use the custom element JSON files or whatever, and we just analyze that and generate that dynamically. So we could easily, now I don't know how big that tree is gonna be, to be perfectly honest, but we could easily just have a simple gulp routine that hits all the packaged JSONs and basically combines them all into one, which is more or less what yarn install does in a monorepo anyway. Combine them all into one and then look at what those top level dependencies are. I don't care what the lower tag is for the most part. And then just auto generate that blob, throw it into our build routine so that when our build routine goes and compiles all these assets to work unbundled, it generates that thing as a special type of endpoint integration, if you will. And that endpoint integration just loads that tag. So then basically you get to use any web component in our universe that we ever push up to our CDN. You're going to pull in 3 dependencies. Now you're only referencing one file, but that file is going to then hit 2 other files to just tee things up. Then anywhere in your application or your CMS or LMS or whatever, if you've used a web component that's in the registry, it just shows up automatically. So that's also going to reduce time to first paint to like trivial levels comparatively. So right now, like in Elms, if I do a reload, it's pretty fast because it hits that one file at the bottom, but then it has to go get everything. Previously, like with what Nikki was doing to get it to work on that Omeka site and on it, I mean, she was just following what I was doing prior to that. It actually was a part of the page. And so as the DOM's being processed, it has to go out and get all those JavaScript files in order to complete the page rendering. So now we'll have, one extra file that taps 2 other small files. They'll get cached at the CDN layer. And then whatever you use, it shows up because of the way dynamic imports work. I don't know how that's going to interface with like the legacy build routine stuff. I think it'll be okay, but we'll really have to do some testing. I plan on doing some testing next week around this, but yeah, that would be utterly ridiculous for Penn State hosting a CDN. I mean, you could go to, with that code, Nikki, we could go to like World Campus and give them 2 lines of code and they could use your video player.
Yeah.
And they don't have to do anything. They just add the 2 lines of JavaScript to a template, basically. It would be terrible.
It would be very terrible.
That is extremely impressive. I'm impressed.
I'm seriously like falling over right now.
So that means anybody at Penn State can use the video player that has been the bane of my existence.
I'm only burning my half. All you care about is money.
It's the wrong movie. He wasn't in D3.
It's the wrong movie. Yeah, he didn't get the reference. That's okay. Yeah, I think that's what I had something called like dynamic import or lazy import discover. And before that, last week I showed something where you had to actually write dimport in the page. And that's stuff that would make life better for us, but not for like your typical person writing HTML. Especially if you pegged this with Nikki's work in the storybook, we could basically communicate to the university and beyond, I mean, beyond the university, but I mean, if we have Penn State elements, for example, like if you had a PSU-logo element, you don't need to learn how to integrate it anymore. You just read the storybook that says, copy and paste this, and then the other part that says, hey, to use anything on this website, copy and paste this, 2 lines, and it would just be sitting there monitoring for changes. Now, I am a little curious about the performance implications of a monitor the entire DOM for changes mutation observer. Mutation observers have gotten a lot less expensive with the last several releases of browsers. And by several, I mean like last 2 years. Because it used to be kind of a like, hey, only use this if you really know what you're doing. So I am a little curious about how that'll scale front end performance wise with the subtree flag, because that subtree is that's, you know, every change to the DOM, it's sending a record bubbling up, right? So imagine you've got an application that dynamically loads stuff. I don't know if that's going to bubble up a whole ton of stuff.
But I mean,
But
you could add additional filters on that, looking for like particular tags and things along those lines.
yeah, that's true. I mean, part of it is, so we roll this out and we just say, hey, anybody, you can do this and get access to these and this works, right? And that has only a certain level of scale, per max performance, right? But at least it empowers people. For us, we do that, Andrew. We say like, well, here's the whitelist, or I'm only going to actually do the mutation observer on this piece. The real test of what I'll tee up next week, or at least looking if I have enough time, is replace the way Hack CMS sets its site up and try to use that instead. So Hack CMS, if I get that registry built, right, that Hack CMS loads from a single tag, well, it has a file that is the entry point, and the entry point hits the Hack CMS site builder tag, and then it kind of figures out the rest of the universe. Hack CMS pages, when they load, dynamically import the definitions, like they have code that does that already. So I could take all that out if this actually pays off the way I'm thinking. I also have to look and see, does the subtree flag bubble up shadow children? I don't think it does, which would be a good thing. If it does, that could be a crippling performance type of a thing. So super experimental. I still got to see, you know, what the implications of this are, but you peg it with some of the CI workflow stuff that Potter is working on. Like he was updating that container, you know, just like click a button, it's there. If we ever get around to cache expiration nicely, then we can ship people the best version of the asset at runtime. But there was a reason I wanted Mike and Nikki to go first, because I knew some of you would understand the implication of what that does. So
That is pretty cool.
I mean, the fact that it completely changes the web components game.
I mean, usage of it, because I think everybody that's in this space they forget that, like, my students did a blog post, or they were told, hey, blog on dev.to. And one of them, he went through and he actually wrote like what would be a legitimate, you know, dev.to article. And he said like, hey, if you're not familiar with front end, here's how you get started at that level. And I thought, wow, that's the part everybody always skips. Is he actually went in and said like, here's how you install Node. Here's what this does. Like, and it's not super in the weeds, but he has all the like copy and paste these 10 commands, and now you can be a front end developer and play. And I think web components and React and all of them more or less skip that part in the learning curve, and don't give credence to the fact that people were able to just pick up and copy and paste jQuery and it worked. And like, that's a big deal for low barriers to entry. I mean, that's why I got into JavaScript, is I could copy an example and it worked. And when you get into this sphere, you can't copy an example and it doesn't work.
Exactly.
Or you can, and it still doesn't work, and none of the help documents are actually helpful.
Right.
As in Storybook without the OpenWC version.
Yeah, that is very true. So I'm hoping, Andrew, that if we can get a like, here's the example web page, copy and paste this, and put, you know, here's your 50 different tag definitions, and they just work, that'll start to unlock more of the jQuery-esque hacker developer. It's unfortunate Collins just fell off the call, but he introduced himself as saying he's not a developer, which is really sad, because when we all started this journey, he was a developer, and it just got way too complex. And he just said like, I'm going to focus on the thing I'm good at, and backed away from it. I mean,
well, quite honestly, I mean, I've been a developer for 15 years, and getting into web components it's hard. And it's not because of the web components. It's because of the build routines that are required in order to get everything working. Like building a web component actually is not hard. Getting it to work in some website, that's hard. And
Are you guys
this
using
fixes
ES6
stuff.
though for all your components?
Sorry, what'd you say, Earl?
Are you guys using ES6 for all your web components?
So we write Mike might know this better than me. I think we write generally in ES6. We might end up using some conventions that are ES7 or ES8. Because like we'll use spread operators and stuff, and I'm not sure what version that's in. But the way that we get the definitions to our end users is I run a build routine that compiles to 3 different targets. So the evergreen target is actually ES8, using some recommendations that Justin Fajani blogged about that basically said like you can compile to ES8 and that will work. Universally in anything that's evergreen, probably for about the last 3 years. Then I have a build routine that works in some squishy versions of Firefox that are ES6 compatible, but not web components compatible without polyfills. And then I have a build routine that's ES5 that attempts, emphasis on attempts, to hit like IE11 and the older version of Edge. And sadly, I've found several versions of Safari, even as high as like 10.1, that I just have to serve ES5 compiled code to be safe. So our build routine actually generates all 3 copies, and they sit in parallel. And then we have a single like script build.js file that figures out on the front end which of those 3 you need based on your features. So that's how we've gotten around the ES6 shipping.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's just been my experience that like with all the new the builds in JavaScript are so they're so complex nowadays, and it's kind of like a breath of fresh air when you go to something like ES6, right? And you don't even need a build routine of any kind at all. You don't even need NPM. You don't need it. And I wonder, I just have this feeling that at some point all of that stuff is going to like collapse on itself because of the complexity that it's gotten to, and that eventually things will just start to change. You look at all these projects out there that are using, they're using Node to do a lot of their unit testing and things like that, which makes a lot of sense, right? But then the artifacts that they're producing don't actually run in the browser. You can't use any of those things in the browser, which makes no sense to me, like none at all, other than from a developer's perspective to say, I want to unit test my stuff, and that's it. And I just feel like there's this big chasm here in this space right now. I just hope it works itself out eventually.
Oops, I'm trying to post links to the chat and then I put them in wrong. Have you read the Pika packages? I'll call it the the unbundling manifesto, because I don't know what he actually calls it.
I haven't. This is my own musings that I've seen, and I'm just tired of it.
So this call is tired of it as well.
Oh yes, you are with the right people.
So no, go ahead, Nikki.
Oh, I was going to say this. A lot of it reminds me of when I interned in city government years ago, like 20, 25 years ago. People in the city government would deliberately make complex systems of their work and not document or share what they were doing because they thought it was job security. And I feel like there's a whole generation of people who learn to develop in these complex ecosystems, maybe did not have to do the basics. And so now they have this great job security, knowing how to manage these crazy ecosystems. And it's job security. It's a city worker.
Or it's, you know, I've been writing stuff in React and I went to a React training thing and this is the way that we make React. And hey, I know this build routine. Oh, you need to learn Webpack? Well, cool, whatever. I mean, like I just learned Webpack. It's not a big deal. And it's right in the wheelhouse of what I'm doing with React. And oh, look, I can go to Vue. Oh, I'm going to do a build on a project. Oh, it uses Webpack. Like it just keeps, it's a whole ecosystem of things that are stitched together that, you know, a thing that really got me, Earl, is when I went off on this was, I was like, why do people have such an issue with these conventions? I don't understand why you don't just write stuff in ES6. And the guy behind Pika wrote a blog post that's like, hey, are you coming from a project that used Webpack? Here's some things that aren't actually in JavaScript. And I was like, oh, now I'm interested. And one of the big things is that in build routines that involve Webpack, you can write import, you know, my CSS file from thing.css. And there's a huge portion of the world that thinks that is a real convention. And instead, it's a compile time convention that Webpack makes possible. Now, just extrapolate that to how many people have made how many millions of projects that have a convention like that somewhere in it because they're like, well, I just want to use that CSS file. And they're not wrong, but that's not a part of the platform. So they've got this like, this mishmash of what real JavaScript is, what ES6 provides, and then what Webpack and other things are doing on their behalf that they're addicted to and don't entirely know which is which. So we are totally on board with what you said. Like I totally skipped all of that. Our build routine, we do things unbundled, as I always frame it. And unbundled is basically just like, we do compile for targets, but you're still ultimately going to be like ES6 / you know, at LRN web components / HAX / HAX.js. You're not going to get this just mashed together everything, in part because of that, because like it's just we were maintaining, you know, Webpack and roll-up files. Even roll-up's a little easier to use for sure, but yeah, it's just I think it's all going to come crashing down eventually. Pika has
that's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I'm like waiting for, is for I'm hoping that's going to happen. It's just there's this divide that exists right now, and it's just I don't get it. I mean, I'm sort of like, I'm not understanding why projects haven't already started, you know, moving to like take like the little bit of stuff I was looking at with CK Editor, right? And you know, all, you know, none of their stuff, there's no ES6 artifacts for it, you know, they're all node based, you know, and there's nothing. In what world does that help me? Because in what way would you not be using CK Editor in the client, right? That's the only place you'd ever be using it to begin with. So it makes it literally, I mean, I get it from a build perspective to say, look, I've got all these unit tests that I need to run. And so I want to run it, you know, I got to run all these things against it. Fine, I get that. But produce your ES6 artifacts so that people can actually like use it without having to, you know, without having to jump through like, you know, 10,000 hoops, it feels like.
Oh, and the other thing is like they'll do this tree shaking so that they can lazy load some stuff. I mean, or rip out code that's not there. Like to me, you're throwing, in that case, I'm bundling CK Editor into our build routine. It goes out the door. So your whole app has CK Editor in it. Like it's a huge library.
Yeah, it's huge. Oh, that's the prop. That's why, listen, I wanted this like in an earlier release, and I actually pulled it back because of all these issues, because it's basically you're building your own CK Editor. That's what you're doing. In the end, you're building your own CK Editor. Yes, you're using Node to kind of, you know, bring in all your functionality and your targets and everything, that all the features and that you want. But in the end, you know, it's Webpack that produces your final piece of JS, and that piece of JS is no different than what the older versions of CK Editor were doing. And it's so like nothing has moved forward. You know what I mean? And I'm just blown away. And here I am trying to do everything in ES6 and be like, look, I don't need build platforms. I don't need all this stuff. I don't need it. I just write my ES6 and it works. And see you later.
I think you would see a fundamental rift in mindset between Silicon Valley app developers who are 30 and under, and those of us that have worked on like monoliths, you know, in like the LMS, CMS space, to go like, no, that's great. You're building an app and it ships and then someone downloads it. My people actually make the content in the thing. I'm creating the environment by which they do that. I don't know what's going to be there. Right. And everyone I talk to is like, well, then, you know, I mean, you don't, well, I don't know, actually. Like, so, I mean, even down to like performance recommendations. Like, I think what we're doing is at odds with what performance recommendations are at times. But I'm like, okay, but if you're trying to sell a widget, I got to get you a website as fast as possible. I'm not opposed to not getting you the website as fast as possible. But if I have a captive audience, as monoliths typically do, I can burn an extra second to get you the assets so that all of the additional page loads send you less data and has a faster experience. So it's stuff that it's really hard to find conversations about, quite honestly. Every time I've brought something up about integrating web components with CMS, people come out of the woodwork and are like, oh, that makes so much sense to do it this way. I've been wondering how you do da-da-da, because everything seems about app building. Like,
yeah, gotcha. I got you now. It makes sense, that point of view. I mean, it's not a great point of view, but it's a point of view.